Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Version 1, a podcast where interesting people come to talk about their creative process, imposter syndrome, inspiration, failures along the way, and much more. I'm your host, Waverly, and you can follow the show on Instagram at Version 1 Podcast and subscribe to our Substack, version1podcast.substack.com. You can also find me on buymeacoffee.com/Waverly Colville if you want to support the show. You can listen to this episode wherever you get your podcasts or head over to YouTube to watch the video version. Remember to leave us a nice review and rate us 5 stars. All right, let's get into the episode. Hi, everybody. I am joined by my guest this week, artist and creator of soul portraits, Devorah Brinckerhoff. Devorah, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Waverly.
I'm so excited to get to talk to you today about soul portraits and all the important creative work that you do. Can we just start with having you introduce yourself to the audience, please?
Well, I am an artist, first and foremost, a mother and a wife, and a daughter and a sister. And I have been drawing and painting pretty much my whole life. And so creativity has been a thread that has traveled with me and grown stronger with every year.
That's wonderful. And could you tell us what a soul portrait is?
That is a great question. It is a mixed media piece of artwork that uses real life experience from an individual. So, your letters, your photos, your journals, favorite recipes, legal documents, whatever materials that you feel have helped shape who you know yourself to be today. Um, so, that is the foundation of an artwork that either individuals create for themselves or I create for them, all for the purpose of moving away from limiting beliefs and false identity. So it's a way to deconstruct some of the conditioning that we've learned and reconstruct who we really are underneath all of those stale messages that we grew up with.
Awesome. I'm so excited to dive into all of that with you because that sounds like really cool and interesting work. I highly suggest anybody who's listening to the episode to go on your website and your Instagram, which will be linked in the show notes, because they're very beautiful and interesting and emotional pieces. So I'm very excited to get into all that with you. But before we do, I want to start and see what you were doing in your career and in your life before you became a soul portrait artist. So could you talk to me? Let's go back all the way to when you were a kid. When you were a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Artist.
An artist?
Yeah, yeah, I was good at drawing and painting, and that was one of the few things that I excelled at. And so, unfortunately, I think for a lot of people who really enjoy making art and having a creative outlet, they're given messages that say they're not good enough or it's not like the person next to them or whatever. And now, so much of what I like to do is trying to dismantle what we think creativity is because it's inherent in all of us. And really, it's about joyful making, using our hands and our body to guide us, our heart, really, our intuition, rather than, for me, skill and technique. Those are important and valuable if you're wanting to be able to create and execute an image, choreography, music that you have in your head and you want it to sound the way or see or appear the way you have it in your mind. Skill and technique are great for that. But for process work or for process work, it's not the product that I'm personally interested in. I once was, but not anymore. It's now really what happens, how do I connect to myself while I'm tapped into creativity. Uh, as a young kid, I loved drawing and painting, and my grandmother went to art school. I didn't really think about going to art school until I was a junior in high school, which is kind of weird to me, but I had a summer at Wesleyan doing an art program there, and they were like, "You should go to art school." I'm like, "Oh, that hadn't occurred to me. Okay." And I did. And I became a painting major and then went down a very traditional path of galleries and representation across the country. Um, and would meet people during openings and then go back to my studio, which is certainly rewarding. But what I do now is a million times more so.
Yeah, absolutely. What was the journey of being a gallery represented artist to then coming up with the concept and transitioning into soul portraits?
So what I hadn't realized as a gallery represented artist is that I was always making work that was for me. That even if something was popular and sold out and I needed to make more, they were always different. And I would contract a little bit making commissions, not all of them. Um, but if I was trying too hard, it took the joy away from me. So then it became about the end result. And so I could recognize that that really wasn't something that I wanted to keep doing. And soul portraits came out of necessity for me to work through my own, at the time, crisis. I didn't know what to do with losing my family of origin and my husband's family. All at once, we lost our belonging with them, and were actually, they took legal action against my husband and I was heartbroken. So I didn't know what to do with having a family that I loved and being a part of something and then not. Um, and so that's how I dealt with it. I started ripping up letters and legal documents and putting them onto canvas. And about 4 hours in, which felt like 5 minutes, I realized that I had disassembled the story of rejection, disassembled the feeling of being bad, and reassembled myself as what I really was. That I started to believe that I was more than the experience I was having at the time. And that opened up so much room inside of me. And I did that for many, many years, just working on myself and my own habits and beliefs. And then I started offering them to other people in the community, and then commissions and workshops and prints. And it just sort of started going from there.
Wow, that's so cool. So yeah, it sounds like it happened sort of really organically. Like you were just trying to process your own family trauma, and then you were like, wow, like this has really been helpful. We should bring this to others because everybody has trauma, right? Like lowercase t and capital T trauma. And so what made you
Yeah.
realize that, because soul portraits, it sounds like very therapeutic. It sounds very processing. Like what made you realize that healing can happen and maybe in some cases should happen through working physically with real materials from your life versus just going to therapy or other methods of processing?
I think all methods of processing are helpful. For me, I would reach a place with a therapist or a coach or a book that I couldn't, it was a wall that kept me stuck, whether it was somebody else's beliefs that I ran into or in some self-help book that said, that took me away from myself. And the little fear and doubt that I was doing something wrong, or the pressure to do it just a certain exact way, got really confusing. So, listening to somebody else's idea of what was correct or wisdom or knowledge, it got me only so far, and it kept me in my head, and it kept me guessing and doubting myself. And so the artwork always brought me inside into some internal wisdom, internal knowing that allowed me to start practicing trusting my own voice. And slowly over time, that became very, very empowering. And so when I'm working with other people now and they want to know how to do it, like there are basic steps, and I'm there to hold a very easy container of what those steps are. But we're the only ones who know our own lived experience. We are the only ones that know what it's like to have lived whatever we've lived. And we're the only ones who have assigned meaning to those experiences. So we're the only ones who can dismantle them. Um, and and so yes, it was organic, but the biggest part about it for me that allowed me to open up to the level of freedom that I wanted was that it didn't require anyone else. It only required me to self-source and to self-witness whatever was happening in my own life, which is unbelievably empowering because I could stop looking for anything external and just return to me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's so powerful. Thank you for sharing. After you made your first soul portrait, about your family trauma that you went through, did you start making other soul portraits for yourself before you started making them for others?
Yes. I when I started with so I'd always been painting and drawing, and that was always acted like a release valve. It let me let out some unconscious tension in my body that I had been holding. But when I first did a soul portrait, it sort of opened up this many, many, many layers that I wanted to understand more deeply, that I was really ready to go in and investigate. And so I just did that until I felt like there wasn't anything left. I'm sure there always is. We're never done. But I cleared enough space out of my own being that I could start living from that internal wisdom, voice, source, heart space, whatever you want to call it, rather than seeking external approval and permission, right? I could give myself permission. So once I felt like I was on more solid ground, more confident, more at ease and at peace, then I felt like I could offer the process to other people. Uh, I felt like anybody who didn't know how to articulate their experiences, people with really complex trauma or complex shame, uh, were drawn to this work because it didn't require them to talk out loud. War veterans, people who had survived suicide, just you name it, like the big stuff that most of us really fear touching. This work was a container for that gave it somewhere to go, gave it a place to land with love and compassion.
Wow, that's so powerful. And that's awesome that this is sort of a pathway for people who, like you said, maybe don't necessarily have the words yet to talk about what they're going through, but can put
Yeah.
something down on paper or can, like create a piece of art. It kind of reminds me of like, oh, I don't remember the proper name, but there's a type of therapy that's like rapid eye movement therapy. And then
Oh, yeah.
but you don't talk, but like it helps you like process it and you don't speak during it. I don't know. I've never done it, so I don't want to say anything like inaccurate, but it kind of reminds me of that where like it's still allowing your brain to kind of like process things in a way that isn't harmful or damaging, but like, still
Right.
also isn't using words if you those aren't available yet to you.
Yeah. I think you're talking about EMDR. Does that sound
Maybe,
right?
maybe. Something like that.
Yeah, and it gets both hemispheres of our brain working together. And because we store our lived experience in our body, it's a somatic. We want to release it from the body where it's stuck or trapped or when we fixate on something, we might fixate it on our mind, but it's correlated to some area of our body where we experience that day or time or moment or interaction or whatever it may be, or several.
Yeah. Have you read The Body Keeps the Score? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly it. I highly recommend anyone listening to read that book. It's so, so interesting. I love that book.
Yeah. Yeah, he's amazing, and he really gave voice to what it means to yeah, to have a body that remembers things that our mind hasn't caught up with yet, doesn't even remember, um, and normalizes how crazy making that can feel. So, yeah, he's awesome, and I think it's been on the bestseller list for, like, 30 years or something. So, he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Could you walk me through your creative process when you're making a soul portrait, whether for yourself or for a client or with a client? Where does the process start?
So, one of the things that I like to tell people is that again, we get into our heads. So the materials that we bring in help us tell our story. So that letter, you don't have to remember it. You don't have to try and capture it in writing right now. You don't have to find the words talking to me or talking to a therapist. Your letter will speak for you. The photograph will represent that version of who you were at the time it was taken, at the time you received it. And so it takes the pressure off of you having to quote unquote get your story right. It's just represented and accurately represented. Now, the place where it gets curious and when people are holding some item from their life, and I can tell you too, because not everybody has items from their life, but for now, we'll talk about people who have items. It's really hard for you to hold something like a letter and even though you remember the version of yourself at the time you got that letter, you can't be in both physical places at the same time. You're right now in the present moment holding evidence of who you were 5 minutes ago, 30 years ago, whatever it is. But but you always have the perspective of who you are now to witness who you were then. And and even though we may have made meaning from that letter 30 years ago, now we have the wisdom to say, is that accurate? Was I accurate about it? And so, if people are another example, if people have gone through a difficult divorce and they feel very uh, angry and bitter and heavy about it, and a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, or questions about their children, so many times over and over again, the people in the workshops, when they're holding those materials of who they used to be when they got married in the first place or fell in love, or they recognize that they were hopeful and optimistic and that they gave it their best and that they thought whatever it was, that they thought it was for life, that for the most part people are entering into these relationships with a really wonderful positive attitude, and over the years it's turned into something else, but the truth of who they are and how it started is usually a really wonderful thing. And so there's so much compassion and self forgiveness that people feel, and relief about, oh, I don't have to keep carrying this idea of a failed relationship around because it wasn't all terrible. And even if it was all terrible, they were doing the best they could with whatever they had at the time. So I don't, did that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you kind of work with people to gather those materials and kind of evaluate where they were in the past versus the perspective on it now and kind of have a conversation in a sense between the past self and the future self or current self, I
Yeah,
should say. That's really cool.
exactly. But that too, the future self, you have to clear out whatever you're holding on to from the past so that you can make room for who you want to become and who you're stepping into. It is a process that honors the past, anchors the now, and invites the future that you want.
Absolutely. And then once you go through that and have the person or your own materials sort of collected on to use in your soul portrait, what is the next step in creating one?
So, really, to follow the intuition in terms of what to pick up, how, where, and how to rip it, what to put down on your canvas, and just or whatever it is you decide to put it down on. It's your foundation, it tells your story. And we let that dry. And then there are some exercises and prompts around what are these materials telling you about yourself? What is the overall arching message that you can receive from the energy of the materials you've collected, ripped up, and glued down to anchor into the timeline from whence they came? And so people write over the top of it whatever messages they feel coming through for themselves, from themselves, and then they paint over it in washes to invite, envision, call in anything that makes them feel hopeful, excited, anchored into, or a symbol of who they're stepping into.
Wow, that's awesome. Who are some of the types of people that you work with? I know you mentioned veterans sometimes or people going through a divorce, but yeah, who typically comes to you and wants a soul portrait?
So, like you said, we all have an experience of trauma, but I think more specifically, so many of us are grieving something. We're grieving parts of ourselves. We have experienced deep loss of some kind, whether that is a spouse, a sibling, a child. So, the people who come to me are either actively in grief and they want a place that can hold that. So parents who have lost young children, miscarriages, stillborn, suicide, like again, all of those, what do you do with that kind of loss? Or somebody who's been married for over 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 years who no longer has their spouse and they're showing up to the holidays and they don't, everybody else still has. So what is it like to exist in a world without the person that that you've known next to you? Like the kind of loss that is really hard to put words to and to adjust to. So, and and I've had a lot of people who've talked to me about feeling that way around pets. And it doesn't matter what the loss is. Loss is loss, and loss is, we all experience it differently and are impacted by it in different ways. And so the process allows you to meet yourself wherever you are in that journey of grieving. Um, that's been the most powerful place that I've seen it. It's what I use for myself, and therefore it seems very understandable that those are the people who often come to me. But other people also use it as a way to celebrate. Again, whether it's a graduation or the birth of a child or a celebration of partnership in, or after 60 years of marriage and they're having an anniversary and they just want to mark like everything their life has held. It's a way, it can be used as a way to celebrate. And I actually think that every soul portrait that anybody makes has a little bit of both, has a little bit of celebration and a little bit of grief and loss, because that's what life is. It's a tapestry and it's all woven together, and every day has micro moments of celebration and loss.
Yeah,
My cup of
absolutely.
coffee. I lost my cup of coffee. I didn't lose it. I drank it and then it's gone. And I'm like, oh, right. So that's a tiny example of just loss.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very beautifully said. Thank you for describing and sharing all of that. I know you mentioned letters often go into soul portraits or photos. Could you talk to me about some of the other materials or artifacts from somebody's life that make it into a soul portrait?
This one person came in and I loved this. I'd never seen it before. So I was doing a live work, an in-person workshop, and she brought in, everybody else brought in, letters and photos and recipes and fabric. And this one person brought in a milk crate overflowing with nail polish.
Oh,
And the reason she made the entire soul portrait with nail polish, because her ex-partner, she was in a really toxic relationship, and it was a year to date that he tried to kill her. And every day, I know it's a rather
my
shocking
God.
story. e- Every, every day he would choose a 1950s, 1960s outfit that she had to match her fingers and toes to every day. And
Whoa.
so she, by the end of this relationship, hated nail polish. understandably. So she brought it in and she just dumped out color after color after color of nail polish on the canvas and wrote herself a note at the end on top of it all in nail polish that said, "Trust your gut." And it was she knew exactly what she wanted to do and she followed her own intuition and listened to what needed to be seen and accepted within herself and released. And she used nail polish. It was great. It was really powerful.
Wow, that is so powerful. Like taking a tool that was used for abuse and turning it into a piece of art that sounds very empowering. And wow, that's incredible. What an incredible example.
It was neat. It was neat. And then, not everybody keeps their portrait or their commissioned piece. And a lot of people rip them up, burn them, making a total ceremony out of really releasing it. Other people rip it up, sew it back together, get it framed, and put it on their wall. You can roll it up and put it away and take it out when you need it. But whatever it is that you want to do is exactly right for you. And many people that I've talked to afterwards, they didn't think that they would like their piece because they call themselves not an artist, but I think everybody's an artist. Um, have framed it, and it's a central piece in their home that reminds them of their strength. It reminds them that, oh, I'm still here, and I'm learning and practicing how to follow that greater, bigger inner wisdom that dwells inside.
Wow, that's incredible. When you are commissioned to make a soul portrait for somebody, how, I guess my first question, I have a couple questions about that because my first is how does your approach change when you're making a soul portrait for yourself versus for somebody else?
That's a great question. Um, so I believe that, well, I don't know where to start answering this. When I'm creating something for somebody else and they hand me over their materials, I spend a long time reading through everything and feeling the energy that goes with that material, those materials, those items. Uh, there's a story, right? Everybody has a story, and the materials give me a glimpse into that story. By far, I do not have the whole picture. I only have whatever is in the materials I'm given that I can tap into. And then I follow an intuitive process around what wants to be, again, what wants to be seen, what wants to be acknowledged, what wants to be met through my own lens of love and compassion. And acceptance, I think, is the biggest piece because the people who hand me their materials often don't know how to engage with their own history. It's too scary, too upsetting. They feel like they can't handle it. I really believe that they can handle it, but they're not ready. And so when they're handing it to me, it's like a step towards their own doorway. Um, and so I'm trying to think of an example. Somebody gave me all of their letters, and they were all love letters from siblings, love letters from parents, love letters from lovers. And they, in their own life, did not know how to receive that love. And they didn't want any of the letters anymore at all. And so they also didn't know what to do with all of those letters. And so when I read everything, it was so overwhelmingly loving. And it was all about opening up to, like, how do we really let go of our resistance to receiving love and welcome it into our life, first from ourselves for ourselves, but then so that we can really receive it from other people who we want to receive it from. uh, I don't know if that answered your question
No, it does.
about it.
No, it does totally. And it kind of led perfectly into like the following question that I had was, when you are receiving such personal materials from somebody's lived experiences that you haven't lived yourself, how do you know you're accurately sort of depicting their story? And you kind of touched on that a bit. But yeah, I just found it like super interesting, like your work versus your work for somebody else, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Like somebody else's story is somebody else's story. And I don't know the depths of it, but I can get a sense of it. And I really just have to suspend everything about myself to the best of my ability and go into a different place, if that makes any sense. Like an energetic, it's a different energy. And what I realized a while back is that I get flooded with images when I'm creating work. And there are things that I dream about or see that I know has to be a painting, and I follow whatever that is. So it's an intuitive visual hit that I get, and I follow it. Um, and and it can be a dance. So when somebody's given me their materials, I'll get hundreds of images based on those materials. And over the course of 3 to 6 to 8 weeks, those images will narrow down and become 3 to 5. And then I'll start, right? I'll start. I've already laid down the foundation of their story, but I'll start mapping it out in a drawing. And then it may change, but really usually one comes up to the surface and that's the one that I follow. And then really it is a sort of a back and forth visual conversation. I don't quite know how it happens, but I feel like the better I am at getting out of the way, the better the piece comes out. So, it's a
Absolutely.
weird thing.
That's cool that it's so intuitive. It sounds like you just have like a really developed sort of like gut feeling of when you know something is right. Or yeah, that's really cool. Um, has a soul portrait ever revealed something that maybe someone wasn't expecting, to learn about themselves? Has a soul portrait ever surprised anybody?
I think that they probably are all a little surprising. They surprise me. I never know what's gonna happen. I haven't had anyone ever feel upset about it. I get nervous because, I take their materials and I'm gone for 2 months and they have no idea what's coming at them. So, obviously, there are lots of conversations in the beginning where people tell me about what paintings of mine resonated, what colors that they've seen in my work feel appropriate for what they're coming to me for in the first place. So all of that information goes into kind of the archive of whatever is going to come up. So one person, his favorite body part are eyes, that he feels really connected to people through seeing their eyes. And in his portrait, there were no discernible eyes. There was like it's more like a shadow. And he was surprised by that, but also that though there weren't clear discernible eyes, he felt were they encompassed every single eye that was ever possible to have, and that the area where eyes would be changed all the time for how he saw them, and that the eyes would see him. So, if that makes sense. So he was surprised that there weren't clear, defined eyes, but that there were the possibility of every eye, and that he felt very seen in the painting and by the painting itself, like watched in a loving way, if like that watched over, I guess.
That's really
And
cool.
he didn't use those exact words, so I'm paraphrasing, but something along those lines. And it's really, really nice because every now and then he'll send me a snapshot of part of the painting that he's sort of visiting and in relationship with on that given day. And so he'll be surprised by new awarenesses, but I'm not privy to what those awarenesses are. But that I get to hear that there is a relationship with the painting that's very alive for people. And I think that that gets to the core of what my work is about, that there's something in them that is ready to wake up, to come alive, to find for self-forgiveness and tolerance and hope and possibility and love. Uh, that's the lens that my work comes through, even though it doesn't always look like that.
Yeah, no, that's
So I
really
don't know.
cool that people are in active conversation with their soul portraits and they can come back to it and be in a different or maybe explore different parts of their story and they don't have to take it all in at once. They can focus on this section or that section. That's really cool that it's yeah, it seems to be a very active and ongoing conversation in some people's lives. That's really cool. You mentioned
Yeah.
earlier that soul portraits can help people work through limiting beliefs that they have. I was
Yeah.
curious what limiting beliefs have been unlocked both for yourself or that you've seen other people's experience through their soul portraits.
Well, I mean, the common one, right, is that our critical mind loves to tell us that we're not enough, that we don't belong, that we've done a bad job, and we're a failure. Like those are like the big, what else? What are some other ones? I don't know. I'm sure I'm forgetting some. Um, so none of that is true. And when I was working with my own sense of rejection, like utter and total rejection of being excommunicated from family, the message that I internalized was wow, like I don't think I could be any more rejected than that. And what does that mean about me? I must be this horrible, terrible person. And so I struggled a lot with self esteem and feeling like I wasn't enough. And for the majority of my young adulthood. And what I realized later when I was creating this is that that's all learned. Like pretty much every belief we have, whether it's from parents or caregivers or religion, spirituality, teachers, community, you just keep going out, culture. They're just all learned. They're all belief systems are internalized, but they're not necessarily true. And really, the only thing that's true is that we're already whole, we're already perfect, and we're already lovable, and we're already valuable no matter what. And so the soul portraits deconstruct where those messages came from in the first place so that you can really hold up the tangible materials and say, is this true? Is it Byron Katie who's always asking, is it true? I
Not
always
sure.
forget. I'm not either, and I have not read her at all. But one of those major people is always saying, like, is that true? Is that belief system true? And I've really come to feel that there isn't any belief that's true other than love, which I know sounds really simple and cliche in this day and age, but I really do believe that. And and that the soul portrait process for me was really about learning how to be my own best friend. Like no one else is going to do it for me. Why would critical thinking, judgment, guilt, shame, anger ever help me become more loving? It only helps grow all of those other ways of believing about myself. And so I was exhausted. I was never going to get anywhere with that way of thinking. So I had to put them down.
Yeah, absolutely. Because soul portraits are so personal and I imagine can be so like emotionally heavy, do people ever are people ever really like hesitant or maybe resistant to making one? And if so,
Yes.
like how do you help them through that?
So I think that we take for granted how much we feel resistance every day, whether it's to clean the house, to cook dinner, to make that pot of coffee in the first place, or whatever it is that you're making. Normal self care, there's a lot of resistance too. And I really want to normalize resistance as moving in the right direction. If you feel resistant, there's something important crackling up, bubbling up to the surface. And so to just allow resistance to be there without listening to it or letting it lead the show. So for people who, because, excuse me, coming to a workshop, people have to collect their materials ahead of time. That is their only homework. I take care of everything else. So if it's an online workshop, people also have to get materials, so which is just glue, and it can be a big piece of paper and like really inexpensive chip brushes, whatever it is that you want to use. It's not complicated, but the resistance is I can do it later, or I'm not ready, or what if I realize something about myself that I'm not ready to realize? And I will say over and over again, I created something in college that I just thought was a lampshade. It absolutely was not a lampshade. It was a lampshade, but it was giving me a ton of information that I was not ready to know. And so I didn't know. Whatever it is that is inside of us, if we're not ready for it, we will not see it. And even though I was creating and using all the same materials that I'm using now, I didn't understand it for the depth of what it was nudging me towards, but it was still a nudge. So there wasn't any fear. So people who feel afraid of what they're going to find out, I'm just like, do not worry about that. If something comes up that is emotional, we'll sit with it, right? We can hold the container of that emotion. Emotions, if we allow them, last about 90 seconds in our system, and then they leave. And so most of the time people feel really afraid, and they realize that their resistance and their anticipation of fear was so much bigger than the actual experience itself. And I've seen it just over and over and over. So at the beginning of a workshop, I will just reassure people that they're going to be okay. And if something ever feels like too much, they can stop and to listen to that inner knowing about what they can handle and what they can't. Because again, I don't know that for anybody other than myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Your work is so, or it can be very emotionally heavy. It sounds like. I was wondering, how do you take care of yourself, especially when you're dealing with other people's emotions? I can imagine that, of course, is so important and very impactful, but maybe can also be exhausting. So, how do you take care of yourself?
I jump on the trampoline after a workshop,
I love
and
that.
I sort of shake out any energy that isn't mine. I love swimming and cold plunging and taking a shower and also releasing any energy that isn't mine. And then oftentimes after a commission piece where I'm dealing with the energy, like really deeply into the energy of somebody else's life, I do one of my own paintings without any material at all, just oil paint on canvas. And I paint very, very quickly. I again am following something other than me. And it's a way to sort of release any extra energy that also isn't mine, and sort of re-inhabit myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I love that you jump on a trampoline. That is so fun. That's awesome. I feel like people don't really have trampolines anymore. I remember them a lot when I was a kid, but I feel like I don't
Yeah,
really see them as much anymore. So that's so cool that you have one. That's so fun.
it is fun. I do like it. It's good for me.
That's amazing. And you mentioned you still paint a lot. That's so cool. Do you still show your work in galleries, or are you still like active? No, you're mostly focused on soul portraits at this point.
Yeah, I left. It was my choice to leave the galleries back in 2019 because I wanted more interaction with people who resonated with my work. I started opening up my studio to like citywide studio tours. Um, and people, my work resonates with a lot of people, but it also really doesn't resonate with another group of people. And so, the people who resonated with my work would stay for hours and talk about life and what relationships felt important and how they were knowing themselves. That really is what my artwork is about. Like how can I support other people in knowing who they really are? And talk about the ways we get pulled away from ourselves and the ways that we come back. And so in in a opening gallery opening situation, I would have conversations like that, but I mean there just isn't enough time to sink in and to be able to have that with everybody that's there, and not everybody there would even want that. And so my work is like a self-selecting process, and I wanted to take the middleman out. I wanted to have less of a barrier between those relationships and those kinds of conversations. And I love doing community soul portraits, and it's sort of like modern day painting and like I don't know how to make quilts, but I love the idea of quilts where everybody has their own square of canvas and they make their own mini soul portrait to add their voice to a larger collective. And so groups can come together. Like you can have a group of people who are all dealing with a stillbirth, or you can have a group of people that are all dealing with divorce, or you can have a group of people that are all dealing with domestic violence or public violence or whatever the issue is. You can come together and have a community portrait where people are hearing and supporting one another and also having their own piece that says, here is my representation of what I've lived through. And it's really powerful.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly powerful because it sounds like you're building a lot stronger and deeper connections and community through the work that you do now. That's really awesome.
Yeah.
Do you ever experience feelings of self-doubt or imposter syndrome?
Uh, Absolutely. I wouldn't say all the time now. I have moments less and less where I'm like, what am I doing? And is this really, you know, making a difference in the world that we live in today? You can get sort of overwhelmed with the state of things. And so I just come back to this is what I know how to do. So I'm going to trust that it's enough. But yes, of course, absolutely. And if I don't get enough sleep or I don't get enough nutritious food, then I get super cranky like the rest of us.
Of course, I get very hangry as well. When when those feelings of self-doubt come up for you, I'm curious, what do they sound like? And what are some self-care things that you do or things that you tell yourself to get past it? Because as you were saying before, like I just hearing you speak and hearing more and learning more about soul portraits, the work that you do sounds so impactful to so many people. And it sounds like you've changed lives through the work that you've done, which is so inspiring to see. So I'm just curious, like, like what the voice sounds like to you and how you get past it.
Well, I think that in the moment when people are having an experience, I can see that they're having a positive experience, and that feels really good and really meaningful. So, most of the time, I'm like, I am so lucky that I get to do this kind of work. Like I'm just blown away by people willing to be vulnerable and share themselves with me. However, when I leave those workshops or I'm in my studio and I'm doing my own thing or I'm cleaning the house or feeling frustrated with the mess of something or another, um, it's easy to forget that there's been an impact made or something that's lasting. And there have been a lot of years where the internal voice that I had was pretty negative. And so it's really only in the last 15 years, which, given is a significant chunk of change, is still less than the amount of time I spent living on in the dark side, as they say. And the positive thing about that, I have to say, is that I haven't met a person or a story that surprised me or made me feel uncomfortable or ever judge another person. I was so busy judging myself that again, I couldn't fathom thinking that there was a any that anyone is bad, inherently bad. And I get a lot of flack for that. So it's okay if people disagree with it, but um the way that I take care of that is to let it be. I don't fight it. I know that that's a natural part of being alive and that it's okay to question uh, what kind of impact I have and to know that sometimes it's not always a positive impact, and that's okay too. That it is the whole tapestry that creates everything. So we I have to include it all. And of course I have down days, and I let myself have down days, and I don't try and force it to go anywhere. I just let it be there.
What is both your favorite part of this work and the most challenging part?
The most challenging part is inspiring people to do it despite the resistance. When they do, it is a game changer. But you can't say something is a game changer and just have people go, okay, I trust you. I'm going to do it now because you said so. The only way people are going to experience what it does to your system, to your life, to your way of thinking is if you do it. And so that part of it is the most challenging part. Words don't teach, experience teaches. And and so people have to be ready to give it a shot. And what was the other part of your question?
My
What's the
your
most?
favorite part.
Oh, I love. It's hard to choose because I love creating art. I love teaching the workshops. But the pinnacle for me are the commissions. Those are, I love being able to sink in and help someone who hasn't been able to touch their deepest wound, their darkest place, and to bring light to it. Because I'm, I'm so far it's not like I like suffering. I don't. And and what people have survived is incredible. And I have a lot of respect for that. I'm not scared of it. Having said that, nobody has to pretend that what they feel or think or have experienced didn't happen. And that is really powerful. And to be able to be let into somebody's world, to be trusted in that way, is a remarkable honor. And creating a soul portrait for someone, so they're handing me the worst of themselves, and I hand it back the best of them. And that, like, crossover connection, first of all, never ends. And I'll always be tethered to every single person that I do a commission for. And it's just the most fun ever. I love it so much.
That's
Even if we're
awesome.
dealing with the darkest material.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there other artists or healers or just other people that you look up to or have influenced your work?
That's a great question. There are so many people who I look up to and who have influenced my work. Um, and I really don't even know how I would name them. I think it is an ever evolving evolution of expansion and growth. And when I read something or I'm in conversation with someone or am looking at another person's artwork that I admire, there's connection, there's overlap, there's inspiration, and that all adds to my own experience. And then there'll be another person work or concept that I am drawn to and follow for a while and expand with on and on and on. That same kind of ever evolving, ever growing, but I wouldn't know how to pinpoint. And I'm terrible with names. So I would never be able to remember everybody's name
No
either.
worries. Um, where do you see soul portraits going? Like, do you have dreams or goals for the future or new directions that you want to explore with it?
I want more people to know that there are other tools for dissolving limiting beliefs and false identity other than talk therapy. This work is a way to anchor and integrate other modalities. So I love working with people who are doing medicine journeys or breath work or yoga. I love working with alternative healing, so light healing, sound healing. I just think it's super cool. And uh, building on all of that together and helping everyone know that there's more than what has been a very narrow path towards. I want to like the word healing, right? I struggle with it. That's my hesitation is because I'm like, oh, there has to be something wrong in order for us to heal from. But if people are suffering or they feel inadequate and they're struggling, then I do want them to know that everything and anything is possible. And I want to help them get there. So, do I have dreams? I want them to be much more known. And I love the idea of doing pop up shows that incorporate community soul portraits, that we can start having conversations about things that have been typically taboo topics. So, domestic violence, sexual violence, all of the ways in which we other each other and sort of um, you know, I don't quite know how to say this, but just the hierarchy and the superior versus inferior. I know that we need all of that in order to equalize. And I want there to be less suffering. I want people to know who they really are. So I would love for it to get bigger
I love that.
slowly.
What is your definition of success?
You know, um, that changes a lot. Because I think that following yourself and doing what you love is probably the highest, for me, definition of success. Being able to support myself and support those that I love and are around me and could use support would really feel great. And that would feel like a different kind of success. I've always felt like I've been very blessed with knowing what I want to do and following that inner voice for the most part. It got a little buried for a while there, but it's familiar to me. So I feel like when we spend time knowing who we are and then sharing that with the world, that is my definition of success.
All right, Devorah, this has been so wonderful. Thank you so much for joining the show and talking to us about soul portraits. It sounds like such important, impactful work that you're doing. And so I really enjoyed hearing from you about all of it. Are you ready to move into the lightning round?
Yes.
All right, what is something new that you've tried lately?
We were making fresh horseradish and we were grating the radish and I don't like super spicy. I don't so my kids were like, "Mama, like smell this. Take a deep inhale." And I resisted that for a lot. Talk about resistance. So trying something new was like inhaling this incredibly powerful, very spicy, made everything close up in water was that was the thing I over the holidays did.
Do you have a lesson or a message that you want to share with listeners?
To practice trusting yourself because you have all your own answers. It's the biggest thing.
What is one thing you wish you knew when you were first starting out?
That I trusted myself and that I knew I had all my own answers. I wish I'd known that. I knew that, but I really forgot it. I think all of us know that, but it's easy to forget living in the world that we live in. Just living,
Absolutely.
just being human.
All right, Devorah, this has been wonderful. Where can everybody find you, support your work, look at soul portraits, maybe even commission you or attend one of your workshops? Tell us all the things.
Everything is soulportrait.art, but then it's soulportrait.art/workshop or soulportrait.art/course or soulportrait.art/, inner voice exercise. So people can book workshops in groups or um, individually and coaching for how to make your work, like if you're a creative and you're wanting to deepen your relationship with your own work, I do a lot of creativity guiding. So, how do you make your work more authentic to represent you?
Awesome.
That
I love that. Well, thank you so much for joining, Devorah. This has been wonderful. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
you too, Waverly. Thanks so much for having me. It's great.